Minister, thanks for being here and thanks for your staff. Again, I just always like to highlight the exceptional work of the civil service and again, how hard it is to operate any ministry, so certainly appreciate that. I want to talk about on page 107, just around in your business plan, and you say across government this commitment has been operational through the adoption of gender-based analysis plus and establishment of centers of responsibility in each ministry to assess the gender and diversity implications of engagement process, policies, programs, and initiatives. So I'm just wondering if really quickly, can you give us an update of that initiative or the status of that initiative and any tangible outcomes?
Thank you so much for the question. I think to best answer this one, I will ask Lenore Neudorf if she can give us the response.
Thank you for the question. Mr. Chair, the ministry has been active in implementing the GBA Plus program. We've been working with the Status of Women Ministry and have used that lens in order to implement our recent policy work. The work that we have done with regard to all of our labor legislation, as an example, has been done through the GBA policy lens. We have taken into account the impacts of the policy on women and other unrepresented groups. And going forward, we intend to train all of our senior staff on the program and continue to apply the policy lens.
Very good. So how many people have received that training, and in all areas of government, including those in the such sector, how many people are receiving the GBA Plus training?
Oh, yeah, Status of Women may be able to respond to a government-wide answer. We can tell you more about labor.
Right, but I mean, your key strategy is to implement these type of lenses, and so again, as we look at encouraging other labor groups or employers, pardon me, to apply this, it just seems to me that you would have an analysis of how many people are receiving this type of training as it's part of your business plan to make sure that people are trained.
Mr. Chair, really at this point, it's a new program that came into the government of Alberta about a year or 2 years ago. Our focus has been to train our own staff at this point and to apply it internally. I think you're quite right. As we move on, we need to start looking outside the organization. So that work is yet to come. But our focus has been making sure that we utilize the tool so that we're ensuring that our policy work reflects the kind of approach you would take through GBA Plus. So that's really where our focus has been at this point.
Right, and so as of January 1st, 2018, how many people and staff in the ministry office have received the GBA Plus training, including training on the Truth and Reconciliation piece and also the United Nations Declaration of Rights on Indigenous People? How many people in your office have received that training?
So I'll see if one of our team members knows the exact number. I can tell you that the ADMs across the government of Alberta have participated in a blanket exercise to build Indigenous awareness as part of a recent ADM conference. That would include all of the labor ADMs. Our workforce development staff also participated in several rounds of Indigenous awareness training to better assist in serving this client group. And we continue to help staff with different training initiatives, but I will see if anyone in the department or the gallery knows the number.
I don't have an exact number, but what I would say is in key parts of the department, for example, in the Workforce Strategies Division, this is included in the required training for all of staff, and it's included in their performance assessments. And as part of the ADM Network Conference, every ADM participated in the blanket exercise, which was a half-day initiative, and the purpose there was to increase understanding. So that's examples of some of the things we're doing. We do have a large number of staff that are moving around between several core ministries that are involved in training programs, and we've been making every effort through incorporating it into division days and Skype meetings and those kinds of things so that people have awareness of the importance of GBA Plus lens.
So in what specific ways will GBA Plus training and an additional training that I just mentioned, in terms of budgeting, how does that show up in your ministry in measurable outcomes? And if you don't have any, do you have an anticipated date of when you will be able to see that? And yeah, so again, I think it's important. If you could just explain, obviously we want to lead by example, and it sounds like you're well underway, certainly in your ministry and with ADMs. But to implement that government-wide, again, as the head of labor, wanting to send a clear message, and when we're asking other Albertans to be a part and, you know, consider things like inclusion and equity, it only makes sense that government would take the lead and make sure that we do that. And I know that, and I'd asked these questions last year in the Status of Women around GBA Plus. I've taken the GBA Plus training, and again, so we should be able to see the measures, how we budget for that, and what are the outcomes in terms of whether it's reducing incidents within government when it comes to conflicts around gender bias analysis and those sort of things. Do you have measurable outcomes at all?
So I certainly appreciate the focus of your question, and this may be something where Labour and Status of Women will need to determine who is tracking, particularly government-wide. I can tell you that when it came to our performance measures and our performance indicators, we went through a very large exercise last year to review what we were measuring, and we looked at a cross-jurisdictional scan across other Labour ministries in the whole country to identify commonly used measures, promising practices, and near-term measures and longer-term measures. Our challenge is with our business plan, we want to be as comprehensive as possible, but we also have space constraints. And so I think that's something I need to take away and talk to our Status of Women minister about to look at how that can be better incorporated as a measurable. But the reason our measures were chosen for our business plan was based on a few different factors. The work of the ministry as a whole, making sure things were understandable, be reliable, and something that allows us to present good value for the time and effort. And that's how we came to the measures we have today.
Very good. And so what measures in your budget promotes the inclusion of women in science, technology, engineering, and math?
So I don't believe we have a specific measure for that, but no, we do not have a specific measure for that. But what we have been doing is providing funding and support for a number of initiatives that promote the inclusion of women in STEM fields. And that's certainly an area that I feel quite strongly about, having come from a programming background and seeing the shortage of women in those industries. So I can tell you more about specific programs that we are funding that do promote the inclusion, if you'd like more information on that.
No, that's fine, Minister. I just think if you could just answer this, I think it's, would it be fair to say that it is crucially important to ensure that government, when asking other employers to change their business models to support inclusion, and recognition of different groups to have a healthier workplace, that government takes the lead on that. When we ask some others and employers to do something, we should have that fully implemented and make that very clear that we are taking the lead on that. Would you agree with that?
I absolutely do. And as you heard from my Deputy Minister, Marianne Everett, and Lenore Neudorf, we've taken quite seriously training our staff and some of those practices. I'm also pleased to say that all my ADMs are women,
right,
which is nice. And so we continue to work to promote inclusion and support women throughout the ministry.
Very good. So on page 108, your key strategy 1.1, lead the implementation and transition of modernized labor laws to protect the workplace rights and well-being of working Albertans. So how is this ministry helping nonprofits provide crucial around-the-clock services in light of the recent overtime legislation without corresponding increases in government funding?
So we have been meeting specifically with the service sector, and I'll ask my Deputy Minister to just provide us with an update on how those conversations have been going.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So we're we've been meeting with community social services as well as children's services and the organizations representing the sector, Align and others. First, to understand sort of what their operating requirements are and to see what we're going to be able to do to sort of reflect that. Because to move from an environment where essentially the regulation was very light to one that says you're going to have to recognize that people have to work sort of more standard hours of work. How do we move there? And one of the things we're finding is that there is some ability, I think, to find an accommodation for them. We've yet to bring it forward to the minister, but looking at how it averages over 4 weeks, recognizing that they respond to emergency situations, and so those aren't always scheduled. And the fact that the staff actually have some flexibility, not a lot, but a little bit of flexibility to say, okay, I was late last night, so I can adjust my schedules going forward. So we're intending to bring forward to the minister a package of information to lead to a decision on whether a variance can be provided or not. So we're working on that right now. It's taking a while because we started from a position where it was just, we don't like the rules to, okay, let us understand your operational requirements. How can we tailor to meet those? And so we're quite deliberately working forward to a solution.
Right, and would it be fair to say you're probably receiving quite a few inquiries from nonprofits that they're very concerned about how they're going to be able to carry on their operations, considering increases in minimum wage, overtime laws, new statutory holidays, those sort of things. Would that be fair to say?
We've certainly, again, like all employers, they've raised concerns, and we've certainly heard them, and we're trying to work our way through to find some solutions for them.
Right, and so as you go through that specifically with nonprofits, do you think it would be appropriate to perhaps have a committee or a task force with nonprofits on it to discuss exactly, as these labor laws changes, what kind of services they may have to drop? And where government might have to pick that up at a much larger cost, those sort of things, so that people aren't getting lost in the fray as this transitions, as these guys try to, nonprofits try to, fix their business model to adapt to the current changes in labor law.
So the departments that they interact with, certainly they're on the front line to sort of deal with the nonprofits and the organizations that represent them. So we essentially play a support role and work with them on that. Certainly with respect to the effective minimum wage, we work closely with those departments to see what is the effect, and government made some decisions about what it was able to do about that. So whether it's a task force or something else, we certainly need to have ongoing dialogue with them about, all right, what are your real needs here? How do we respond to it? What changes can you make to your business model that are reasonable, that allow for workers to have the level of protection that they deserve? So it's really trying to find an appropriate balance, and we're continuing to work our way through that.
Right. So, where can you tell me in your budget where you're addressing that?
So this would be,
traditional that any time that minister staff is speaking, that the minister does direct a question to it, the staff member.
I will ask my deputy minister to respond. No, that's okay.
sorry, I got a little enthusiastic there.
I appreciate the enthusiasm.
And so, we don't have a specific line item for this. You would find the expenditures related to this in areas related to strategy and policy, and also employment standards delivery. Those are the two areas that are working directly on this.
Okay, and so again, just back to when those inquiries in your office, how many people are dedicated to talk to nonprofits, their board of directors, and those type of people about the changes in labor laws, minimum wage, those sort of things, how they comply? Are there different standards for nonprofits in terms of dealing with that right now?
I'll ask my deputy minister to respond.
So we haven't carved out, there's not special rules for nonprofits than anyone else. What we're doing right now is trying to work through, the existing hours of work provisions to see if we can provide the minister some advice on a variance she might be able to provide. So we're working on that now. The number of staff that were involved in that, I'm going to estimate at about, half a dozen. If we have a few people in the policy area and a few people in the employment standards delivery area, working directly to understand, what exactly are we able to do. And so, so that's essentially what we have on this one. With respect to sort of talking to boards of directors and the agencies themselves, I think that would be captured in the broader work that we're doing around education and outreach on employment standards. And so we've done a number of webinars and They were quite well received, and we're currently working with the Alberta Chamber of Commerce to deliver sessions around the province. And so, and we will continue to do those if other organizations want us to do this. We've got people who are available to go and say, okay, this is how it works, and here's what you can do, and here's the process you go through.
Right. So Minister, do you take a position on what an actual living wage is and what that is by the hour? And is there consideration to move forward on that in the future?
So we know that a living wage is calculated usually in a city or a specific geographic area as the standard definition of it is what a two-parent family needs to make when they have 2 kids, and they need to cover the costs of transportation, food, housing, and some of those basics. And the living wage varies depending on the region. The highest living wages in Alberta tend to be in Edmonton and Calgary. And the living wage will adjust. So we know, for example, the living wage recently dropped when our government introduced some of the Alberta child benefit programs and some of those tax credits that were introduced in 2015, 2016 when we were first elected. So the living wage will always change. We are currently working towards that last step of the increase in the minimum wage. The minimum amount an employee can be paid will move to $15 on October 1 of this year, the final step. And we have not made any plans to move to a living wage system. Part of the challenge with a living wage is there is no single living wage for all of the province. It's different in different areas.
Right. And so would it also be fair to say that if the living wage changes based on the demographics, that perhaps increasing the minimum wage to $15 may have a more significant impact in rural and remote Alberta in terms of businesses being able to survive? And you can imagine if you're in remote Alberta and you provide one particular service and there's a carte blanche change to minimum wage, that some of those services might be vacated in these areas, leaving people in the lurch. And, in your budget and in your business plans, are you looking to address that to again, look at the impact of minimum wage, again, based on demographic?
So making sure that all hardworking Albertans are able to support themselves and their families was a key goal of our government, and behind the increase to the minimum wage that we've been moving forward with. We continue to monitor the impacts of the increasing minimum wage, posting publicly available documents like the Alberta minimum wage profile and low wage profiles, and continuing to put forward monthly labor force statistics and wage and salary survey information. What we're seeing is the employment numbers in Alberta continue to increase and improve, particularly in industries that hire minimum wage workers, where they've seen higher than average, or sorry, I guess it would be lower. The unemployment numbers have been better than average in minimum wage hiring industries during this time that we've been increasing the minimum wage. We know that as we increase the minimum wage, we're providing more disposable income to those low-wage workers who are in turn spending that money locally and helping to boost the economy from the bottom up.
And so has your department looked at or have a statistic of how many hours worked before the minimum wage increases and how many hours worked after the fact?
So
sorry, just one
of course.
to add to that. Can we also explain, again, I'm excited and want to see Alberta recover in the best possible way. We still seem to be struggling in the nation in terms of unemployment. And what are your strategies around that, and why that might be? So,
Statistics Canada provides a lot of really great labor market information and information like hours worked, as well as average weekly wages, median wages, a lot of that great information. Regarding our unemployment numbers, as we continue to monitor the increase in minimum wage, we see that employment in accommodation and food services remains strong. And we continue to support business by doing things like the small business cut, tax credits and access to capital for businesses. When it comes to our unemployment numbers, I find that there's a very good comparator in that we can look to our next door neighbor, Saskatchewan. We've had significant increases in our minimum wage where Saskatchewan has not. And when we compare, for example, youth unemployment,
Hesitate to interrupt. The time
it's the
allowed for
same.
third party has concluded. We will now take a 5-minute break and return at 22:11.